Hello and welcome. I am Terry Wilson, representative for Texas House District 20, which includes Burnett, Milam, and parts of Williamson County. Aggregate Production Operations, we'll call it APO from here, create the raw materials that help support the expanding infrastructure for the growth that Texas is experiencing. However, over the last couple of years, the interaction between APOs and nearby people and communities has become a more commonplace issue, not only in our district, but across the entire state. In fact, nearly every member of the Texas House and Senate has an APO in their district. In the last legislative session, there were over 25 bills filed that sought to balance the concerns of all the parties. Unfortunately, these types of issues take multiple sessions and to reach a consensus or compromise, and that's why we are here today. Because of our hard work collectively last session, Speaker Bonin created an interim study committee on aggregate production operations, tasked with bringing legislators, industry, and communities together to recommend a path forward on APO issues to the upcoming 87th legislature. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we were not able to hold the actual formal committee meetings that was planned March, April, and May. Instead, we are proceeding in a more unorthodox method for an interim topic of study. While these town halls won't be able to take official testimony, and the members of the committee won't be able to discuss the issues directly in this forum, the committee staff have done the due diligence to gather their questions and concerns on the issues involved. And I trust that the presenters will address them to the best of their ability. I am grateful to the House parliamentarians for helping me find a way for people to have their voices heard. And to the members of the committee, thank you for being flexible as we handle our circumstances. Our goal over the next 3 days is to examine the information regarding aggregate production operations from multiple points of view, from the industry, agencies, and our citizens. We are seeking to learn and discover as much as we can about this growing industry and how Texas can best interact with it. I want to thank all the members of this committee, other elected officials, industry representatives, agency staff, and most importantly, our citizens who have joined us this week. I hope that it is informative and productive as possible. Now, a couple of housekeeping issues. Due to the House rules, we are not able to host virtual committee meetings. Additionally, subject to public meeting rules and House rules, we are unable to have interactive responses or questions from members of this committee or House. If you have questions, you can submit them to the committee clerk email address as you should see on your screen right now. We will do our best to answer them afterwards on the committee webpage. Again, if you would like to tell your story on Thursday, please register using the link on the screen before you now. Now, today we're going to learn about the aggregate industry. As you know, the aggregate industry provides the needed raw materials to build our houses, roads, and other infrastructure needed by our growing state. We would like to lead off today with local business owners who successfully operated an aggregate production operation within the state of Texas. Joining me is Joel Shackelford, who has developed and sold an aggregate operation and has served on numerous aggregate advisory committees across Texas. Jill, thank you for joining us. I would like to have a bit of discussion about your experiences managing an aggregate production operation, what you have seen and learned, and what you think works best. Good morning, Jill. Jill, we have lost you. Could you please join the call?
I think I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Jill, we have lost you. Can you please join the call?
Okay, let me rejoin. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm on.
Jeff?
Jill, are you with us?
Yes.
Good morning, Jill. We are at your point
morning.
in the presentation.
Okay.
Please go ahead and proceed.
Real quickly, let me just introduce myself. Can y'all hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Jill, we
Okay.
can hear you.
Okay. I'm Jill Shackelford. I developed and sold a mining operation in Buda, Texas. It was under the name Industrial Asphalt in KBDJ. Some of you might remember it from previous sessions. It was a working ranch in Hays County near a residence called Ruby Ranch. And I currently sold my company in 2011, and I do expert witness testimony now and work with communities, residents, and the industry on consulting. Let's see, how are we running these slides here? Can you go to the next slide? So today I just want to share with you my story and the best management practices that I implemented at my quarry, mistakes I made, and a host of other things. You can go on. I wanted to give you an example of what covered conveyors look like. And you can see these are covered conveyors that we installed at my operation down in the pit here at Ruby Ranch. Again, it was acquired by Summit Materials in 2011, and they're currently still operating the site. Some of the BMPs I implemented were the backup alarms that don't beep. They're called white noise. Some of them quack like a duck. Some of them chirp like a bird. It just depends on preference, but they all meet the MSHA, OSHA requirements. And, you know, I found that went a really long way with my neighbors. In the beginning, I was having a lot of complaints on backup alarms, and frankly, they irritate me as well. And so implementing those was a really quick and easy thing that I think really everybody would agree with me that it's just a no-brainer. Backup alarms that don't beep really are a lot less invasive. Okay. Again, the benefits are one back, please. The benefits are they don't beep. They're not irritating, but they are still safe to the operator, and they meet all the safety requirements in MSHA and OPSHA. And you know, still the warning can save a life if needed. So they're not too quiet where the operator can't hear, but they are respectful of the neighbor. Okay. Another BMP, just to quickly talk through, is the windbreaks. You know, that helps with dust abatement. You can be trees or shrubs that we left in place while we were mining. We tried to leave as much native trees, shrubs, you know, anything that we could. Or you can construct windbreaks throughout your operation to especially during high wind situations. And we had some wind out there in Hays County, typically blew from the north. And so we kind of tracked that and put up the windbreaks appropriately. Okay. Here's an example of just leaving trees. You know, you can see our silt fence right here and some stockpiles, but we try to leave as much native trees, shrubs, brush as possible. And we were also wildlife habitat conservation land. And so I had environmental projects going on outside of my mining operation. Okay. This is just an example of a really wide road, for safety reasons, trying to keep those roads as wide as possible, incoming truck traffic, employees, etc. Just a good BMP. Paved road, I would say, is really very controlling environment for dust. I would say our paved road probably kept most of our dust down more than even running a water truck at the time. I encourage operators to pave their roads as far back as possible to the pit. It's just a great BMP, and it really, you can see, I mean, it's a very dust-free environment. I was mining out in the Barton Springs segment of the Edwards Aquifer, and we'll get to those rules here in a minute, but an on-site fuel service center. At the time, I was not storing fuel on the site. I brought it in with a mobile service truck, which is another good BMP. But this is just an example of the fuel containment center there that's now roof is a BMP, fully contained, just trying to prevent any spill, especially if you're over the aquifer. I wanted to show you guys an up-close picture of a covered conveyor again. And you can see my drop points right here of material coming off 2 belts. Notice there's not any dust coming off those drop points, which is really important. A simple mist spray right here at the drop point just keeps a lot of dust down. It's just a good BMP for people to implement. It's easy. And some additional BMPs that we implemented were the berms, controlling our runoff. It's particularly from rainwater, stormwater. Paving the haul roads is just a no-brainer. You can use regular asphalt, you can use concrete, you can use recycled asphalt, just depending on where you're located. The tire wash is a great BMP for any of you that aren't familiar with it. Just inside your gate before those trucks leave the site, having those tires washed just keeps tracking out. Especially we were adjacent to a state highway like many quarries are. Just a good BMP to keep the road clean. Vegetated cover all throughout my site, just helped with emission control, dust abatement, runoff. I mean, just easy and that people can do. And then, of course, we talked about the windbreaks and the designated vehicle and equipment maintenance area. Another BMP that I implemented personally, and again, this is applicable to my area, but it also came from discussion with my quarry advisory council that I had implemented, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Is we held the outbound trucks during the school zone hours because we were near a school right on FM 967 there in Hayes County. So working with the school district and the local stakeholders, we held those trucks just when the yellow lights were flashing for school zone, and it didn't seem to be a big production limitation on my part, and it was definitely a safety measure that we implemented. Some people might think that's a little bit extreme. It can be, just depending where you are, but it was also really well received, and we felt good that we knew that any eastbound trucks leaving my quarry weren't from my quarry because we were holding them during the school hour. I want to talk some about blasting. It's always a hot topic. If y'all can click, there's a little video here. If you can click on that, whoever's running the slideshow, you can see, just want to show you this blast. It may not load. Well, that's okay. Anyway, I was going to show you the picture of the blast, but anyway, dust monitors, are innovative right now. There's a lot of discussion around dust monitors to keep the particulate matter, under control and knowing where you are, which just goes back to compliance monitoring from every emission factor that you might be emitting. And I think that's just a good BMP to implement. I did not monitor dust at the time. Just for full disclosure, but I think it's an innovative way, for the operator to know where they at, for the landowner to be protected, and it's not an expensive endeavor. So this is a picture of a monitor. For example, they run about $700 per monitor per month. So, to me, it's just a safeguard. There you go. Here comes the blast. And we'll get more into blasting here in a minute, but y'all can see how this dust is coming out in a particular matter. And it all depends on the location of the blast and the sizing. But this vibration and air over pressure criteria is very important. Operators today definitely have innovative technology to be able to control their blasts. Blasting is very sophisticated and it's very uneventful if it's done right. I had a town hall meeting. We actually set off this blast for the neighborhood to see and just want people to understand when we're blasting. And I would encourage everyone, and most of the operators I know today that are responsible, they are communicating their blast schedule via text message or email. And I think that really helps the neighbor or stakeholders, know what to expect when it's coming. And it also helps the operator if there's a blast, that we've set off or not, we're tracking when the blasts are. And so if someone calls, you've either blasted or you haven't. And it's a very transparent record for people. So, I like that. The Bureau of Mines, of course, 8507 has done a lot of study on what are the safe factors for blasting, and that's very cut and dry. Most mines use a third party expert, just like I did. I certainly didn't want to be doing my own blasting. So I think that's super helpful, just relying on an expert for each area of the operation. Okay. Because I was mining on the Barton Springs segment of the Edwards Aquifer, there was a lot of concern over contamination of groundwater, and we implemented a dry plant, and I'm going to talk about that here in a few minutes. But when I say dry plant, it was an air classifying system. And so basically, for anyone that was listening that's not real familiar with it, a lot of times we've got to use a pretty significant amount of water to wash our rock. And that's not just because we want to, that's to meet the state specification or the federal specification that we're under. In my situation out here, we implemented some dry technology, which meant we were basically sucking the dust off of the rock instead of washing it with water. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But again, these covered conveyors that I showed you earlier that are now in the slide, they have an air pressure system that's driving them. And then we have these little bag houses sitting all over the plant that basically suck the dust off. Go to the next one. So again, this was an alternative to groundwater. This is an article here that they did on my quarry when we implemented this technology. I met with my stakeholders and we discussed a lot, about groundwater and where we were, which may not be applicable to other operators, but certainly where there's a concern for groundwater, this was a great alternative. It worked out very well for me. It's some European technology that I introduced to reduce dust and water consumption. And we can talk, I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that, but it was very innovative at the time, and it's a good alternative. So it was originally developed in Europe to meet their European emission standards, which are very strict. Again, it contains sealed conveyors throughout the plant, dust collectors, and for people that are in the asphalt industry, that's basically a small bag house. Had several of them sitting on my plant. And I like to kind of describe it as a vacuum cleaner. Literally we were sucking the dust off the rock to meet the specification. It's a minimal use of water. The process does not like water. So the operator would be at a little bit of disadvantage when it rains because you will be shut down. It does not like water. So just a point there. I've been asked during this presentation and often, does the state overreach into the aggregate industry? And I referenced this TCQ RG 500 for a reason. I was mining out on the Barton Springs segment of the Edwards Aquifer, which is the most sensitive area around my operation, and it's sole source groundwater at the time. And I was personally involved with the rewrite of the RG 500 rules. Mark Vickery was the executive director at the time, and his team came out to my site and looked at all our BMPs. and we were a part of, just kind of the rewrite of those Edwards rules. And if you, in my personal opinion, if operators would just treat their site like it was on the Edwards, whether it is or not, I feel like those are some very good rules, and there's some great BMP, some great safeguards, and that's not a hard compliance effort. I think in-house compliance, which I've referenced down here, is important. A lot of times an operator will hire an expert to come in and write their plan, their stormwater plan, or their water pollution abatement plan, or emissions compliance plan, but then they leave and go back to their their industry. And so I think it's important for operators to have in-house compliance, and can just completely be monitoring your compliance. And when you're doing that, it's just a safeguard for both you and the public. So I would reference the RG 500. In my opinion, I don't feel like the state overreaches. I think a good operator is going to follow stringent regulations and not have a problem with it. In this part of the presentation, I really want to talk about community engagement. And a lot of these town hall meetings have been prompted because of some organized groups that are passionate about getting some additional regulations on board. And I just want to tell you that, as a former owner and operator, when I opened my quarry, I made some mistakes. I made some real mistakes communicating with the public, with my neighbors, and I kind of had the mentality of, well, I know I had the mentality of, I had a big ranch and I had carved out a significant amount of acreage for buffer zone. And I thought that was enough. And I was doing environmental projects on that part, but I made mistakes in my communication with the public. And so I had two groups here shown, Stop the Crusher, which is an organized effort by actually someone I knew in the area who's also an elected official now, and she did a really good job of being vocal. And then the neighborhood was Ruby Ranch, and certainly their HOA was very concerned about my operation. And so I just want to say, I thought I was communicating well, but as I got to know my neighbors and stakeholders, I realized they had some true concern about my operation, that their feelings were real, and it was my job to educate them on what I was doing or what I was not doing, and just just being totally transparent. And so my advice to anyone I consult these days is it's never too late to be transparent. I had organized opposition against my operation. I had legislative action taken, and all because I failed to communicate some things in the beginning. And so once I kind of became very involved in meeting with my stakeholders, elected officials, and neighbors, I put together a quarry advisory council that basically we sat down at the table once a month in the beginning, and then it became once a quarter, and that's still going on today. I would say that these organized groups definitely educated me on what they were perceiving my operation to be and what they felt. And so it was my job to bring them out to the site, educate them, and then engage them in my operation. And so we had a transparent form of communication. And I would just advise, I really am passionate about that. Just being transparent and having people out and sitting down at the table together on a regular basis. And I think, these town hall meetings, Representative Wilson has done a great job of getting everyone at the table. And I think that's really important. And so I just want to, I really want to put an emphasis on this because it's extremely important in today's environment. We're mining a lot of times closer to metropolitan areas than we would have in the past. And that's geology. And so, it's really important. And I want to say, with all the activity centered around the APO registrations, my operation would be considered an APO, but and Jeff, if you could take us back to the slide of the quarry, this is mining limestone. This is a big operation. We are blasting. We are, we're under an standard air permit, not a standard air permit, operating air permit. But this is considered an APO. And if we can get to that slide, I don't know. But anyway, my point is APOs also include someone that might just be going and borrowing what we call borrowed material, and it may just be sandy loam. They may not be mining like we are, and so there's a little bit of a clarification, in my opinion, that I think that needs to be made. Ever since the House bill came on, we all signed up as APOs. We were existing operators at the time, but you've got everything from what I was doing out here, which I would consider a very large operation, and there are certainly operations bigger land-wise than we were, but we were running 1,000 tons an hour, and it was a significant operation. Well, you may have someone that's extremely small, just doing a little sand and gravel operation or borrowing loam, and it's still an APO. And so I think it's important that we clarify those, and I think it would help with the communication. So that's another thing I wanted to point out. And with that, I would just leave it for question and answers for anything that you guys want me to go over. That, I just kind of gave a high level summary of what I was doing, the mistakes I made, and then now what I encourage people to do, and what I learned, especially from my opposition, who we became, basically allies. We worked together to try to achieve really good communication.
Got to get used to this mute button here.
I'm not used to running my slideshow either, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll try to fix that for the next generations. So, Jill, I'm very thankful for the blasting piece. At the end of the day, I would have been disappointed being an infantry guy myself of 32 years. We love blasts, so thanks again for that.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome.
All right. So, Jill, it's great to see industry taking the initiative to become part of the community and keep the people around them in mind. That's the bottom line, and your message is loud and clear. And I will tell you, I just took tons of notes of everything. I mean, you thought through it all. The backup being to the conveyor belts, covered conveyor belts, using dry plant technology, because absolutely, when you look in Texas, a lot of Texas don't even have water districts, so it's a right of capture, right. And obviously you can put small communities at risk when it comes to waters and water tables being low during drought times. And I appreciate the fact that you touched on the overreach, and you're right. Community engagement is extremely important, and we'll hear more from groups who have organized thoughtfully with science and so forth like that to help us work through some of these issues. And and the piece that you mentioned about it's never too late to be transparent.
That's right.
Spot on. So, a question for you. When we discussed the implementation of some of these changes last session, it was put forward that they would be prohibitively expensive. How much did these changes impact your bottom line?
I'm not going to quote exact numbers. I don't know the number off the top of my head now. I've been removed from it for a little while. But I will say, when you're talking backup alarms and dust monitoring and, berms and your typical BMPs, I would say those did not impact my bottom line. They were expenses that were incurred, but they were also, very protective of my operation and my neighbors. The dry technology was certainly a capital expenditure. It was a significant expenditure for me at the time. And I was just family-owned business back then. But I would say, looking at the, if you really compare that to, conserving groundwater, and a lot of times, you're buying water, and then also just the environmental impact, while it was a capital expenditure, I honestly do feel like the investment over the life of my operation did not impact my bottom line that much. I don't. I think it was it is an extreme measure, but it was applicable to my area. And over time, over the life of the operation, I don't see that it was any more expensive than if I would have been washing the aggregate and building the ponds and, monitoring my sedimentation and everything that would incur for that area. I don't think it was that much of an impact.
Okay. Let me ask you, how long did these changes take to put all these things in place? I mean, I don't know the span of time for which your operation was in order, but
Yeah.
within an order of magnitude, how expensive would it be for an existing plant of your quarry size to make those changes versus a new plant?
Well, let me answer this in a couple of ways. First of all, with the exception of the dry technology, the other changes are fairly simple, especially backup alarms, berms. You're just your BMPs that are pretty typical. And I use the example of holding those trucks. That could have been a potential bottom line impact. But it's really hard to compare that to maybe an accident on the highway, so you don't even go there. It's just something I think is the right thing. A lot of operators do it these days. I started out like a lot of operations do under what's called a PBR, permit by rule, and it was a limited 200 ton an hour operation. And a lot of operators start out that way, and it's not necessarily to be sneaky and get in. You're really trying to get your quarry opened up and get some revenue going while you're going through the permitting process. And my permit was very controversial because I made some communication mistakes, and it was also in an area, next to a high-end neighborhood. And so, rightly so, there were some concerns and organized opposition. So it took a while. And so when I implemented the dry technology, it did take about 6 months for me to make that change. But I never really got going under the using water, so that I really can't speak to that, but I do know it's an alternative. And what I like about it as well these days in this market is, if we're in a drought, it's a good alternative, because you could get yourself in a position where you're doing both. You're using aggregate that's washed with groundwater or water you're bringing in, and if we get in a drought situation, it's a good plan B to go dry. So you're minimizing your use of groundwater.
No, very good. Thank you. I don't believe I have visited a plant yet with the dry plant technology. I'm going to definitely have to make a visit and see that firsthand.
Sure, I like that. Well, I don't know of another one.
Yeah, thank you. And Jill, I really appreciate you being here today.
Sure.
You've been very helpful during last session, and of course, be very, very helpful as we move forward on our interim report when we start doing that work. So, again, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And by the way, those who are with us on Facebook Live, if you have follow-on questions, please put them in the chat or contact us at the email that we had posted earlier, and we'll make sure that we'll follow up on those questions and report out at a later date. All right. Next, we will hear from Carcy and Cleve Clinton. The Clinton family has been in the crushed limestone industry for over 70 years in Burnett County. Additionally, they also operate the Houston Clinton Company Ranch alongside the quarry. They have 4 generations of promoting good stewardship of the land, water, and the environment of our great state. Carcy, Cleve, good morning. Carcy, Cleve, are you with us this morning?
There we go. Oh, 1 second.
Carcy, Cleve, are you with us?
There we go.
Carcy, Cleve, are you with us? Team, if we could, let's give Carcy and Cleve a call to see if it's muted on their end.
Colonel Wilson,
Yes.
can you hear me? Yeah, we're waiting on allowing Cleve to join us. He's also going to be on the presentation, but for whatever reason is not able to get in just yet.
Okay, I see. Well, I tell you, I had a glowing introduction. Sorry you missed it.
Well, thank you so much.
We highlighted about how y'all been in business for 70 years and, of course, part of the community there in Burnett County, much like Texas Crushed Stone in Williamson County.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I am being told on this end that Cleve should be able to join us.
I'm on now. Yes, thank you. Apparently,
Good morning, Cleve.
what I thought I knew about Zoom, obviously I was wrong. Thanks, Jeff, for letting me in.
No doubt. So I have already made the introduction online, given some background in terms of your family and your involvement in the community, and of course, we really appreciate y'all being here today. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I apologize that I may not know what y'all have talked about, but I'll just assume that all we've got so far is an introduction. Much of what you're going to see, Representative Wilson, is what you heard last November at what was called the Hanson Celebration. It was our opportunity to, as the owner, the Clintons, Carcy, Cleve, and Claudia, to work with the owner, Lehigh Hanson. And it happened to coincide with the 70th anniversary of Houston Clinton Company on the property. What you see now on the screen is, on the right is a picture of last year's, it was actually, I think, taken by Google last year, Google Earth last year. And you'll see at the top on the right is the dark blue is the original pit. And the light blue is another nearby pit. That area north of the verdant green, the green V that you will see, are trees aligning on the right side, Hamilton Creek, and on the left side, Delaware Creek. The area south of that is our ranch, and therefore on the southeast side of that is the current quarry face. And then you'll see the green to the right of that is irrigated property you'll hear more about later. That is part of our partnership with Lehigh Hanson. The left side picture is what it looked like in the 60s. And again, that particular picture is the unwater-filled area that is the dark blue on the right side. That was taken when we were still in operation in the 60s. When I say we, next slide, please. I'm talking about Houston Clinton and Son. They were a little older then. Ramsey's on the left and Sam Houston Clinton Jr.'s on the right. Our grandfather, Ramsey Clinton, is grandfather Houston Clinton is on the far left. The Ramsey Clintons are the ones you see in the front of the dozer, the front end loader on the right side. My mother being in the middle, and the front end loader you can see is a pretty good sized piece of equipment. We don't come close to being the height of the tire you'll see in the top left. Next, please. So when done in the 60s, this is what it looked like. It's a far cry from what you saw, Representative Wilson, on your tour last November. And LB and the Hanson folks asked me to tell you hello and wish you well. And with the time you described us as being a gold standard quarry, for which we're grateful. But I will hasten to tell you that if we're the gold standard, we don't intend to sit quietly by and rest on our laurels. Our goal is to continue to do the best we can, and with Hanson to do the best they can, for us as owners to be to be good owners and provide the resources they need to do their job. And hopefully then they will, and they have, you'll learn in a minute, work with us to give us access to those resources that they don't use to use for the benefit of our ranching operation. Next slide, please. Carcy.
Yeah, as Cleve stated, our grandfather and father operated this quarry from 1949 to 1960. And in July of 1960, sold out to a company called sold the operational aspect of the quarry to Texas Construction Material. Next slide, please. In 1969, as it happens July as well, the Texas Construction Material sold the operation side to Lone Star Cement. In that tenure of Lone Star Cement, our grandfather passed away in 77. Next slide, please. In 1985, the quarry operations sold to Lone Star, to Pioneer Concrete. And in that tenure, my father retired from the quarry industry, at least actively. Next slide.
So there he is, our father Ramsey and mom Emmy in front of the face of the quarry in 2005. Next slide. Where it's sporting and proudly sporting his Hanson. One of the things that I was impressed about our meeting last year with Leah Hanson and Representative Wilson is the things that Hanson has done in this plant in order to take lessons learned and try to take those lessons and move them into new expansion and new techniques on our site. And we're grateful for that, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of being able to enjoy the resources that we've been blessed to receive. For example, you'll see these the conveyor, that you don't see the conveyor belts, but you see the conveyor mechanisms. It's our understanding that the conveyor mechanisms had been specially designed to permit the belts as they go over the rollers. When you get to the end and the rock drops off, the belt then flips so that the top of the belt that was carrying the rock remains the top of the belt going back to the to be reloaded, if you will. That minimizes or reduces the dust that then gets transferred both to the air and to the water as it passes over Hamilton Creek. Hanson is very attuned to silica dust and blasting issues that could affect the property. For example, the good news, I guess, for us though, is that we are 3/4 of a mile from Highway 281, and we're 1/4 of a mile from the Mormon Mill Road. And it's our understanding that the quarry face is 1.5 miles from the closest residence. Even with all those things, we have been challenged in the past to demonstrate to Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TSEC, that we do not provide undue amount of vibrations. There are test mechanisms for that on the property, monitoring points on the property for vibrations, and also TSEC installed at the behest of one of our neighboring landowners several years ago, installed an air monitoring device near Shepherd Hospital, I think it's still called Shepherd Hospital. In any event, Seton Hospital, I think is maybe what it's now called, on 281 and Hoover Road. In any event, we have passed with flying colors, it's my understanding. Certainly haven't got any complaints from TSEC about the air or the water or the vibrations. Next slide, please. Drainage is a big issue. When we talk about water, My understanding is that if you look to the right, you'll see the deep blue pond, if you will. Actually, it's a lake very deep, about 90 feet, the original quarry for us. From that lake, every day in the summer, a 9,000 gallon water truck is loaded up, and it puts water on all the roads and all the dusty areas on the quarry to eliminate dust. Also, what we've got is a drainage obligation, and part of the expansion included a lot of adjustment to the terrain to avoid the water draining from the quarry production area into the two creeks. As I pointed out in a slide earlier, you can see the green lines on the right side and the left side of the quarry. Those two green lines represent trees on either side of Hamilton Creek, again on the right, Delaware Creek on the left, and the production area, which you can see north of the Hamilton Creek area, would, but for the change in the terrain, risk draining into Hamilton Creek. And now all aspects of the production area direct the water that's used to keep the dust down back into the old quarry area. Next slide, please. Carcy.
So another thing that we've grown up with and are very mindful of is that's stewardship of the land. And in the process of the quarrying operation, it's, I guess, industry practice to push back the overburden, which is, in layman's term, the topsoil. And over the last several years, there's been about 52,000 cubic yards of overburden that have been stored in one area. In times past, and now starting this month again, we have used that overburden in conjunction with our operator partner, Hanson, to improve our range conditions by repurposing that stockpile, if you will, of non-aggregate product we call topsoil to cover up rocks and non-productive shallow soil near this cedar thicket to be able to grow and improve the rangeland. It's about 11 acres we're looking at right there on the parallel yellow line to the road. Right next to that is an irrigation line. So we come out of the floor of the pit and have about 6,000 feet of irrigation transmission line that we spread over 8 paddocks currently and use for irrigating that property so that we can recycle that water. But this will allow us to add another paddock of 11 acres, and I'm told that 52 is somewhere around 52,000 cubic yards would also cover that and probably again as much, which will also be in close proximity to the transmission line. Next slide, please. The other benefit of that is that stockpile of dirt overburden occupies rangeland that now we're going to uncover and reutilize for range conditions. This is a picture of one of our deployment systems. It's a side row irrigation system. This is about a 28 acre cell. We do utilize a deferred grazing program that allows us to more efficiently graze the land and more efficiently grow grass and utilize and recycle the water. Next slide, please. So is kind of a look back off the hill. You know, we have worked harmoniously with a quarry operation. Our ranching operation has worked harmoniously with the quarry operation now going on 4 generations in stewarding our shared land, water, and air, and in certainly very much in consideration of our neighbors around us. We're from here, we've lived here, we're going to live here, so we are very keen to our conservation and our respect for our community and our state. Next slide, please.
I want to talk to you about the Austin Western Railroad in just a minute, but let me circle back on a couple of thoughts. You've seen a lot of pictures about water. You've heard us talk a lot about water, and obviously the water availability is important to Hanson to maintain its dust control, and it's important to our ranching operation for grass. It's also important for y'all to know that we work very closely with and regularly are in meetings with Central Texas Groundwater Conservation District. The Central Texas Groundwater Conservation District, we are told by them that we have no proximity to the Edwards Aquifer. Apparently, I heard that was mentioned earlier, and I think it's important for us to let y'all know that Edwards Aquifer is not a part of the water that we deal with on a regular basis. And if the Central Texas Groundwater Conservation District is to tell us otherwise, then we'll deal with that if that becomes an issue. But right now, all the water that we've got is, in fact, there's some very interesting parts about the water systems that we have on our property, including on the old quarry property, a large number of springs that feed Hamilton Creek. With that said, let me move on to Austin Western Railroad for just a minute. In the Clintons' opinion, and perhaps even in Lehigh Hanson's opinion, without speaking too quickly for Lehigh, the biggest thing that this committee could do to aid us, and I believe the other 4 quarries up and down our line, is to help us address the availability of rail. Let me be a little bit more specific. If you look at the map on the right, the short line rail that extends from Llano through McNeil and over to Giddings, not all the way to Giddings, but to McNeil, is run by Austin Western Railroad, owned by Watco Companies. That short line rail is leased from Austin Cap Metro. And the line, if you look down, you'll see Granite Mountain Marble Falls to the left, on the right side of the slide, to the bottom left of that map, you'll see Granite Mountain Marble Falls. That short line rail, many of you who grew up in Texas know that the granite from the Texas Capitol came from Granite Mountain. That short line rail was built to get to Austin, Texas from Granite Mountain in order to transport the granite. So it's been around quite a while. Understandably, people got to looking in Burnett County and they figured out not only does it have granite, but it also has a lot of fine limestone aggregate. Ours in particular is high in magnesium content, which makes it strong. Very useful for construction of roads and construction of buildings and house foundations. There are 4, as I mentioned, 4 other quarries on that same line, basically between Marble Falls and Burnett. We are told that Austin Western is unable to use the line currently unable to use the line when a passenger rail is being operated. The Cap Metro operates its passenger line much of the daylight hours, certainly from Monday through Friday and often on Saturday, leaving a very limited window, if you will, for rock to move from the Burnett quarries all the way to McNeil. You'll see just north of the Austin Depot, McNeil is where the interchange is that allows a short line to move rock and move rail to the UP and BNSF, putting it on a main line that allows it to get to other parts of Austin and to Houston. So to give you an example of what we're talking about, how big a deal this is, if you look on my almost correct chart, you will find that the tons per car of about 100 to 115 tons is generally the right number. We're going to use that for an example. And a 100-car train, more and more trains are being designed to be longer than 100 cars. That's 11,500 tons. A single truck, if the rail's not available, a truck can only carry 34 tons. Therefore, the number of trucks that would be required equivalent to an 11,500 ton train would be 338 trucks for each train. For 1 million tons, which is what most quarries are trying to get to a year, 1 million tons, you're looking at 87 cars, I beg your pardon, 87 trains to move 1 million tons of rock. Now, here's where my chart is almost good, but not quite. And frankly, even when I reran the numbers, I find it astounding. But the correct calculation is not 696 trucks required to move 1 million tons, but it's 87 trains times 338 trucks, or 30,000 trucks required to move 1 million tons of rock. And if you want to extrapolate that to 4 other quarries on the same line, you're looking at 150,000 trucks. Currently, each of those quarries relies upon US Highway 281 to move rock when it does get moved by truck. So you're looking at rock moving on US Highway 281, either north-south on 281, east-west on 29, or east-west on 71, most likely headed back to the east, where most of the construction is in the Austin and Houston areas. A real favor that this committee could do, and I know you're looking into aggregate production and you want to make sure everything works well, the best way you can do, in addition to the dust, the noise, the vibration from any blasting, which, by the way, it's incredible how much better blasting is today. That's a whole nother subject that we don't have time for. But what can be done today in a single blast is far superior to what could even be done 10 years ago. Nevertheless, all those things are what is going to happen on site. There are problems on site for quarries on site. I get it. But to move that amount of rock across state highways and US highways is the best way to move it, the fastest, safest, less impact on the highways, less dusty, less noisy way to move it is by rail. Now, there's some good things that potentially can happen with allowing the commercial rail and private rail to play well with each other, passenger rail to play well with each other on the same line. Hopefully that'll be completed before the end of the year. That could be a very, very big deal for the state of Texas, perhaps for this committee. So if you will, mentally change the number in the lower right corner of my slide from 696 to 30,000 trucks. 30,000 trucks. Next slide, please. So with that, we thank State Representative Colonel Terry Wilson, and it's good to see you again after not quite a year, and the House Interim Study Committee on Aggregate Production Operations. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. Carcy, Claudia, and I are grateful for the blessings we've been given. We hope to be good stewards, and we hope to continue to work with Lehigh Hanson, Austin Western Railroad, and Cap Metro to deliver building materials to the Austin and Houston area in the safest, most economical, and the best fashion for our neighbors and for the construction industry and for us, frankly. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all. Carcy?
I reiterate, I think that's our presentation. Again, Colonel West, thank you so much. Colonel Wilson, thank you so much for including us. I said that as a compliment, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you for including us in this presentation. Thank you for your work. And together, I think there's a lot of exciting times in front of us in the aggregate crushed limestone area.
Carcy, Cleve, please give my best to Claudia. I will tell you, very thankful that you're here today because you're absolutely correct. This is a gold star standard company. And last November, I was just so impressed by the improvements that you've made. And frankly, your facility before those improvements was already well up there in terms of public safety and conservation of water, and I can go on and on and on. You had mentioned that
Somebody
that
cut your mic.
I'm sorry, you here?
Still,
Okay, so
thank you.
I understand that. Was I cut off, or did they hear me?
There's a glitch on the backside.
You were cut off for quite some time.
I bet it was a very good, but we missed it.
All the nice.
Well, you know what? It's so good. I'm going to say it again. Your company and your family are a gold star standard in terms of how y'all operate. Before y'all went in and made all these improvements that we were able to see open back up last November, you were already very involved into the community, making sure that there was transparency involved, informing. You were looking to public safety needs in terms of your trucks coming on and off the road. You were ensuring that debris was shake, rattled, and rolled prior to. You had water conservation in mind, dust abatement, all those sorts of things. I'm just very, very thankful for y'all to continue to keep your neighbors in mind and, of course, provide that well-needed resource to our state as we continue to grow. Now, one of the things that you had mentioned was the blasting monitors and air quality monitors. How has that worked out for y'all, and is it expensive?
Well, we've done it voluntarily. Actually, Lehigh Hanson has done it voluntarily. Originally, one of our neighbors to the south bought the ranch to the south and then started kicking up some bunch of dust, if you will. At least that's our perception, with TSEC, and strongly suggested that the dust coming out of the quarry was unacceptable. As a result, it's my understanding that a dust monitor was installed at his behest near the hospital, which is probably a mile, maybe 2 miles north of us. Then there was further conversation, and I can only imagine, I'm going to speculate a little bit for Lehigh Hanson. They had a private outfit put in a couple of monitors, and I'm expecting that they wanted to be able to present data to anyone who challenged their operation to demonstrate that what they're doing was the best standards ever, and that it exceeded any criteria that might be imposed by MSHA, which is the mining equivalent to OSHA, to TSEC and everybody else. So these were done for Hanson's. Hanson initiated and has monitored these, and I can only imagine they do it to be able to show to anybody that their operations are very well done, and their movement and their movement monitors Brett's. More, Carcy, do you know?
I'm familiar with the seismic and the dust.
So that's a self-imposed. Frankly, and I'm grateful that Lehigh Hanson is so forward-thinking that they did it without motivation from some third party.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate the fact that it's self-imposed, but I'm wondering, what are your thoughts when industry is going to place new plants in close proximity to communities, if that should be something that should be required instead of elected to? Your thoughts?
We've got such a great relationship with Hanson that, and we own the property, I guess, maybe that helps. But we, I, I'm, I'm reluctant to say that we didn't like it. Let me put it that way. We were a little bit put out that someone would suggest that the way that we were operating was not correct, and that we were putting dust in the air, and that we had unacceptable seismic movement. And so we felt like what we were doing was correct. Now, the way others operate, I couldn't begin to say whether that's a good idea for y'all to impose upon them or not. I, you like to know the rules and play by the rules, I suppose. I don't know that would be something that I would. I don't know. I don't really know what I think about that. I guess if I was a guy living next door to it, I'd think it's a great idea. But if I'm operating, I might not think it's such a good idea. So there you go.
Colonel Wilson, I don't guess I know the permitting of a planned community or the permitting of a development. I do know, as do we all, the geology is unique. Am I muted?
No, you're on.
No, sir, we can hear you.
The geology, it might be, the geology is unique to the area. I believe we said there's 5 different quarries in pretty close proximity to where we are. So is it, I think there's room to work together. There's no doubt. And I think that we must continue to be good neighbors and be good stewards. But it just seems like, there ought to be consideration that's given to the quarries being permitted and being approved. I would think possibly the same would be required for a development proposal that would go in certainly in proximity to a quarry or potential consideration as that for both water and traffic and safety. So I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword.
Well, and to add to that a little bit, there's going to come a time when the development across Highway 281 from us is going to fill up. We hope so. Burnett's a great place to live, and we hope that a lot of folks are able to figure that out and want to build houses and plant their roots in Burnett. It also is across the street from us, and so when the day comes, or if the day comes, that our truck traffic picks up through inability to move rock over on the rail, we fully expect that the folks across the highway are going to not appreciate the fact that we got trucks coming in and out of our front door. So we're going to have to figure out a way to live together. And that living together is hopefully started on the front end by saying, we're here, we're doing what we can, and we're doing the best we can in order for Lehigh Hanson to continue to operate and provide construction materials, and yet for the residents across the street to own their houses. And undoubtedly there's going to be some tension down the road at some point over truck traffic.
Yeah, so I agree. You know, it's a perfect storm in that area where y'all are located, simply because that's where a lot of the growth is happening between Marbles Falls and Burnett. Of course, that's where the train track is. And I heard your message loud and clear in terms of the necessity to continue to invest in rail lines and so forth. The sheer volume of trucks, as you so well pointed out, could be reduced significantly. Or I could look at it from the reverse, in that if that rail line wasn't there, considering that the stone and the mineral is there, I couldn't imagine what the truck traffic would be like in the absence of that rail line. And, when you look at the fact that y'all been in place for 70 years, just as Williamson County, their Texas crushed stone. Folks have literally moved there because of their responsible operations. Matter of fact, y'all know this. Bill Snead invested in on his own rail line there, and at the end of the day, because of their operations, the county chose to put bypass through it. You have communities that are growing in and around it, and that just demonstrates that there can be coexistence. On the other hand, you and I both know that this isn't just a Texas industry or Texas communities or businesses investing in this now. We have folks all the way from New York, Pennsylvania to Brussels who is buying up land, investing in land for future harvest. And for example, we're all aware of Double Horn. An outfit out of New York chose to go right in between two communities, and frankly, when you look at that behavior, it kind of puts all of y'all in the same bucket, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have industry on the first day to basically outline that there is a difference between those great companies within our communities in Texas and those who are coming in and causing us lots of problems. And while y'all may do things to self-impose in terms of air quality and blasting and setbacks so there can be beautification along the highway and to consume some of that debris, there are companies that you can see firsthand in Williamson County that doesn't do water recirc, that is building up against the road, on new roads, by the way, and aren't taking some of the same considerations. So I just say that, again, being a resident of Burnett County, I'm very thankful to have Hanson in that operation and y'all's courtesy and respect to our community. And please give my best to Claudia. I know that you guys are continuing to work hard with that ranch as well. So thank you much for being here today.
Our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Yes.
the opportunity.
Yes, sir. And for those of y'all, just a reminder, they're monitoring on Facebook. I need to remind you that you can go into the chat, send your questions that you may have, or as we mentioned previously on the Facebook post there, you can also see an email with Jeff Frazier's email address for which you can send your questions in, and hopefully we'll be able to get those things answered and posted in the near future. And so with that, I'm going to transition now to TACA. We've heard directly from our APO owners and operators the last hour and a half or so, and I'd like to turn to the Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association, also known as TACA. A little bit about TACA. The association supports its member companies by providing industry information to the public. They work media. They work with policy makers and regulators. They advocate for their industry issues, and by creating industry training courses and materials, they help members effectively manage their businesses. I have seen that firsthand in the past year and a half since session, where they have worked with particular companies to address some of the immediate community concerns, some successfully, some not. But at the end of the day, they're into the fight here. And so today, representing TACA, I would like to introduce Mr. Josh Leftwich. A little bit about Josh. Josh was selected as president of TACA earlier this year and comes into this position with over 20 years of experience in mining and energy sectors. Josh, I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Representative Wilson. We look forward to talking to you about TACA and being here and talking about our industry. So the Texas Aggregate Concrete Association is a leading state trade association for the aggregate, concrete, and cement production industries, representing a growing industry with more than $9 billion annually in direct economic impact. TACA represents members who are the main resource for its necessary construction materials, representing 75% of the concrete ready mix, 80% of the aggregates, and 100% of the cement producers in the state. More than 100,000 Texans are employed by state's aggregate, concrete, and cement industries, along with the supporting companies that supply equipment and services to these producers. Concrete and aggregates provide the basic raw materials essential to the construction of vital transportation routes, homes, hospitals, schools, as well as countless other projects, both public and private. TACA members work hard to support Texas' growing population. With approximately 1,000 people moving to Texas every day, we know it's imperative to keep up with state's growing infrastructure needs. And that's our job. Texas is growing at a rate that consumes per capita approximately 2 yards of concrete, 10 tons of aggregate, and about 0.6 tons of cement per person. Texas will see an additional 5.1 million residents in the next 10 years and will require the use of more than 35 to 50 million tons of stone, sand, and gravel each and every year. Texas is a leader in consumption of following materials. Ready mix 61.8 million cubic yards. It's 16% of the total US volume. Aggregates, which includes rock and sand and gravel, 310 million tons. That's 10% more than number 2, California, and number 3, Florida combined. Cement, 18.3 million tons. It's equal to number 2 and number 3, Florida, California combined. Just to give you an idea of what it takes to keep Texas going, to pave 1 mile of a 4-lane highway requires 38,000 tons of stone, sand, or gravel. Texas is number 1 in total lane miles for a total of 639,000. 90% of all aggregates are produced within 50 miles of where they are used. The average annual salary for a job at a stone, sand, and gravel operation is $75,000 a year. For every quarry job, additional 4.87 additional jobs are created throughout the economy. The industry provides $10 billion in direct annual economic impact to Texas. Just to give you an idea of the industry and what TACA members and other companies in our industry, their impact during this COVID pandemic, TACA members were deemed part of the essential critical infrastructure workforce during the COVID-19 pandemic. What this means is that all our members kept on working during the pandemic. There was no layoffs, jobs kept on going. TACA consistently provided information on industry best practices and COVID-19 safety procedures and other resources to its members and the public. Regulatory oversight. More than 15 state and federal regulatory agencies oversee the different aspects of the aggregate, concrete, cement, and other industries in Texas. An unnecessary burdensome regulatory system would serve only to minimize a silent tax on citizens and critically diminish the buying power to Texas to address its infrastructure needs. It just does not make sense for Texas. TCEQ is a primary regulatory agency for the aggregate production operation industry in Texas, including responsibilities the federal government has delegated to TCEQ to enforce the implementation of federal environmental laws, including air quality and waste. TCEQ's permitting process has been delegated by the federal government and been developed through extensive and rigorous data analysis, which incorporates modeling, sampling, monitoring, and toxicological information gathered and synthesized to ensure that human health and environment are protected. The standards established by this process incorporate highly conservative assumptions that go well above and beyond the levels that would be considered to have any potential adverse impacts to human health and the environment. TCEQ can and does seek administrative, civil, and criminal penalties for environmental violation. In administrative cases, the agency has authority to levy penalties up to $25,000 per day per violation. TACA members support the existing regulatory structure as they seek to protect the public and communities from injury or property damage. In addition to regulatory requirements, our members institute many practices that mitigate noise, dust, and other considered nuisances at their own expense. For example, truck traffic from new or expanding APOs is regulated under TxDOT requirements, especially those concerning driveway access to state highways. If a new turn lane or acceleration deceleration lane is required, the APO must adhere to a donation agreement, making it responsible for construction of the road improvement according to TxDOT design requirements. Texas has the benefit of critical deposits of aggregate materials to continue to help fuel the growth economy of the state. Not utilizing these native resources will limit how infrastructure is developed. For example, the delivered price of sand and gravel doubles at roughly 23 miles, while that of crushed rock doubles at 45 miles. Limiting APO facilities in Texas unnecessarily would add an insurmountable cost for public and private infrastructure investment. Texas aggregate production companies have safely operated for decades in close proximity to its customers and end users without adding strain on the community or the infrastructure necessary to keep the Texas economy vibrant and strong. Growth and development cannot happen without use aggregate materials produced from APOs. These facilities create skilled labor jobs and contribute a significant amount of taxes to the local municipal revenues. TACA members and companies and employees are invested in the communities in which they live and work. In closing, TACA members provide the materials that have built and sustained Texas. They believe in Texas and operate their companies within the designated framework, continually going above and beyond to be good neighbors and vital members of the community.
Josh,
Good.
is that your dog?
No, it's not my dog.
Okay, if somebody out there could go on mute if you're not talking, I'd appreciate it. All right, so Josh, thank you so much for being here today, and I know you're new at the role of being the El Presidente there at TACA. And I remember the day I first met you. I think you were working for Knife River, were you not?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yes. And we were in Judge Oakley's office there in Burnett, and I was very appreciative of the fact that Knife River took great notes in terms of what we thought a responsible company would do coming into Burnett County, and I don't think there's a single one that Knife River hasn't addressed and is actively out there to do, all the way from water circulation to acceleration deceleration lanes going on to that busy 281. So any comment in that regard?
Yeah, I think that was an effort by Knife River while I was there, and I think many of our members would like to take the same efforts to work with their communities and what they do, and work with the local landowners and reach out to them on their operations with local officials, and to start that dialogue. And I know many of our members have done that and will continue to work with those people with their operations too.
What is NOEs?
What was
Let's
that?
see. Okay, I'm looking at some notes here and some statistics in terms of TCEQ, number of surveys performed, which has been quite a few. 2019 alone, they done 1,443 surveys, and of course in 2020 now we're at the 1,288. So, obviously continue to expect significant growth. But what I find interesting is, out of all the operations and so forth like that, in the enforceable side, there's only been 157 violations written only 24 had been fined. And so you could garner a lot out of that. You could sit there and say, well, evidently the violations didn't meet the requirements for a fine or so forth. But considering the vast majority of issues and complaints that have called in there, do you believe that our current regulation right now is relevant to address the issues associated with those companies that aren't monitoring their dust, going over into their neighbors, that aren't providing the acceleration deceleration lanes, aren't recircling the water where there's not a water district and so forth, and so what are your thoughts in terms of where our regulations stand to address those?
I think from my standpoint and my member standpoint, I think we feel the regulations are appropriate for what they are. And with these regulations, most of the member companies follow them to the T and work with TCEQ if issues come up. I think increased regulation would limit companies in what they would like to do and being innovative and lock them down on different ideas or things, such as like what Jill is explaining with Summit and the different technologies that Hansen has done also. So it's very site specific too. So there's various degrees of sites, and different sites have different issues. So I don't think additional regulations can address every local specific site. And I think companies can work with TCEQ and their neighbors and local politicians to come up with innovative ways to mitigate any kind of issues that may arise.
Sure, and your answer doesn't surprise me in that obviously there are some good actors. There's a lot, but there's those few that aren't, and a lot of them are prevalent in Williamson County, some in Hayes, and I could just go on and on. But at the end of the day, is the silent tax from overregulation due to the actual cost of the change, or due to red tape and legal cost?
I don't.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, I don't think so. I think the TCEQ has mechanisms in place, and we actually supported those last session with TCEQ on penalties and violations, and they're actually in works right now on working on their fees for violations also, just as an agency. So I think they as a whole have the responsibility, and they have the power to properly regulate companies, and if it's needed, then they can cite those companies to get them in compliance.
Okay, so we've heard from obviously Hansen, of course, Jill earlier. Those changes, how are those who have added voluntarily those changes been able to stay competitive on price?
I think companies overall, they each have very different strategies on the way they operate their plants and the way they can be efficient. And in the end, they can make sure those changes are not, they can still be competitive in the environment. I mean, these companies have been around for many years, and that's just the way they do business nowadays. So it's ingrained in their company's philosophy and the way they want to be good stewards of the environment, good neighbors, those type of things. And they're willing to make that investment in their facilities to be those good neighbors and to work within the regulations from TCEQ.
Yeah, and I would say those companies that do that fit in their community very well. And when I sat there and I looked through the numbers of complaints and so forth associated with Hansen's or the Texas crushed stone and so forth like that, that there's very few complaints at all. But on the other hand, you look at these companies, say going down Ronald Reagan 183, that aren't observing those same things. It's through the roof, but in terms of the complaints and so forth, but nothing's changing their behavior. So what would you say to a community that realizes that they're there? What is it that can be done to incentivize those companies who do not want to do anything to actually get more in line with the habits of Bill Snead or the Clintons?
I think it goes back to that those companies, for whatever reason, they operate the way they do. If they're not being in compliance, then people need to be communicating with the TCEQ or other regulated officials to discuss that with the operators. I think that the neighbors need to go and talk to the operators and reach out to them too. And I think most of the operators are willing to work with their neighbors and work within the confines of the regulations.
And of course, we wouldn't have rocks in the middle of the road or dust, or the adjoining ranch with dust all over their trees when they're running a cattle operation and so forth like that. If maybe there was something done to incentivize that, but obviously they're meeting regulation, but still and yet we still have those problems.
Yeah,
is there
and
anything that
go ahead.
I apologize, didn't mean to step on you.
No, go ahead, you're fine.
Yeah, is there anything out there in terms of our current regulations or rules by an agency, however you want to call it, that could be tweaked to help with the calling for acceleration, deceleration lanes for these grossly overweight trucks, or to something that needs to be tweaked when we have a operation that's pulling in millions of gallons of water, but it's in a water deprived area? Is there anything in regulation that or statutes that could be tweaked to address air quality or setbacks or any of those sorts of things that TACA sees could happen for coexistence?
I believe that there's already plenty of rules that are in place to address those things. TxDOT has rules on those type of things. TCEQ has setback rules already within their regulations. Groundwater districts have rules on pumping. Many operators, they don't want to have to use groundwater. They'd rather recirculate and filter their water that they already have. Pumping water costs money, and that ultimately hits the bottom line of an operator. So they want to be as efficient as possible. So I think that operators try to recirculate, recycle, filter the water they do have, and use minimal amounts as they can, just from an operational cost. So I believe all those things that you address, they are different rules and regulations in place that can address each one of those.
And again, for those companies that are not doing that, we're seeing that the meetings with the companies, with the community and so forth like that, and where there is no water district and a right to capture, and the fact that they can dig very close to their property line. Obviously, the permit is per the piece of equipment, and of course there has to be setbacks for that piece of equipment. But in terms of TACA, yourself and the board right now, the regulations and the rules is exactly where it needs to be, and we just need to move on.
You know, I still think it's TCEQ's rules are appropriate for our industries. They've those rules have been addressed over years, and TACA continually works with TCEQ on the rules that are in place to better the industry and to come up with new standards. I think there needs to be maybe more, more level of priority on enforcement, maybe to address those operators. But overall, I think the regulations that are in place are still appropriate, and they provide the protection to the neighbors, to the public. The Mine Safety and Health Association, MSHA, they go out and inspect these quarries regularly, and they would not allow any unsafe acts either. If they thought it was unsafe, then there's definitely going to be penalties. They don't really leave the site without issuing some type of fine. So I think there's multiple oversights and agencies that our industry currently has, and it's very appropriate for the work we do.
Okay. Do you know how long it takes MSHA to respond to a PLAS complaint?
I sure don't.
Yeah, I'm with you. We're going to have to find that out, because you're right. We need to look to the level of enforcement that's out there, and maybe it's inadequate, but at the same time, I think we need to go in detail on each. And that's one of the things that we'll hope to push the committee to look at in detail. Tell me, what is TACA's legislative priorities for this upcoming 87th legislative session?
Our priorities will continue to be to support our industry, and there's going to be, there's going to be funding shortages with agencies and with TxDOT. That's going to be an issue that we'll be working on. There'll be continued support for just strengthening our overall industry and the rules and legislation that's already in place.
When you say strengthening the rules that are in place, can you expand on that?
We continue to work with TCEQ, and we're working with TCEQ on a BMP bill for the sand and gravel industry right now. So we'll continue to work with them on that, and addressing other rules that need to be addressed as the session comes up.
I'm sorry, did you say you're working with TCEQ on BMP, Bravo Mike Papa? What is that?
Yeah. Best management practices for sand and gravel operations.
Oh, okay, great. And at the end of the day, what sort of changes are y'all looking to make in that endeavor, and does it benefit the communities?
We're just looking to put rules in place that allow companies that are using, that says that companies need to be using best management practices in certain areas with their mining, and it just outlines that they need to be using those, and it'll include a guidance document with certain type of BMPs that could be used around their mining operations to protect, their neighbors and waterways and those type of things around them.
Okay, I see. All right, very good. You mentioned you have I don't recall, what was the number of members you have at TACA?
We have roughly just around 75 to 100 producer members, and 200 what we call allied members that are our support members.
I see. And of those, how many exclusively operate within the state, and how many have operations in other states?
Oh, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that breakdown offhand.
Okay, I see. And is
Several,
there
most of our
a,
members have stuff in other states though too.
is
So
now TACA isn't the only association that that supports the industry. What are those other organizations?
the AGC supports has those producer members also. Texas Association of Manufacturers, they probably have some members too in there. Things like that.
I see. Okay. Well, unfortunately, some of the national groups could not be with us today, and I know that Texas isn't the only state that has aggregate production. What are some of the national regulations and policies that also impact aggregate production?
I think, I don't know if they're about national. I mean, EPA has their standards that TCEQ uses from the EPA on aggregate production. So all those standards, which are other states have, are rolled down to TCEQ. So most federal agencies oversee other states unless they're have a state agency like TCEQ, which is an agreement state with the EPA. So a lot of these regulations we do have are federally mandated already, and TCEQ just is enforcing them for EPA. MSHA is a federal MSHA is also another federal regulatory agency that is overall mining in the U.S. So they really don't have agreement states that they work with. They have federal agents all over the U.S. working with quarry operations.
Well, Josh, can you share with us all some of the states that have had overbearing or overreach within this industry and how it's impacted that industry and therefore shutting them down and having to move to Texas, because obviously it's growing a lot in Texas for this mineral, and I realize that some of this is going outside the state. So if you can give us specific examples of overregulation in other states and what state and what state specifically. Thank you.
I think California is probably a state where there's been overregulation of the industry. There still is aggregate facilities out there, but there's no new facilities being developed, and they're operating under grandfather rules or things like that. But California probably is a state that has, overregulated this industry and almost pushed it out probably.
Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate you being here today. It's good to see individual owners and industry groups interested in finding ways to work with our local communities. That's been a resounding message this morning. I hope that we can work together this session.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Representative Wilson.
Yes, thank you. And by the way, I greatly appreciate your work with Knife River because that company's implementing every one of those gold standard that's really communicating and being supported by our communities. And we'll be hearing from Judge Oakley and others tomorrow in that regard. So I hope you can join us tomorrow as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Folks, again, you can go to our Facebook chat or the email that we had provided earlier, and we'll make sure we put that email up before we close today on a chart. You can send in your questions, and of course, we'd like you to register to participate on Thursday if you want to share your story. All right, before we wrap up, what I'd like to do is address one more sector. I have one sector of the industry to talk to, and that's construction. And I am now joined by Grant Dean. Grant has spent the last 30 years in construction business as the owner and operator of Cactus companies right here in the Texas Hill Country. Grant, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Terry. Good to hear you this morning, and thank you very much for hosting this meeting.
Yes, sir. Grant, I was hoping you could speak to your experience as it pertains to raw materials for construction and the effects of what aggregate production operations have on the community, and of course anything else you'd like to share with the group.
I would love to. Do you have me unmuted, Jeff? Hello.
You're good to go, Grant.
All right, I'm not unmuted. I'm not unmuted, Terry. Hello.
Grant, we have you. We can hear you.
Okay, you got me? Okay. Hi, Terry. Glad to have you on board this morning and putting this meeting together for us.
Yes, sir.
Can you
Thank
hear
you
me
for
now?
being here. We really appreciate your hard work to lead the community. Matter of fact, you were one of the founders of the movement, I would say, especially when you looked at some of the issues of these companies coming in and co-locating within our communities. And of course, you've been doing a great job with communicating with TACA, pointing out certain companies and bringing their help to bear to try to work out things for our community. So on behalf of our citizens, thank you, Grant. It's all yours.
Well, sir, I thank you, and I want to reach out, not only thanking you, but I want to thank TACA too, as far as they have been very forthcoming as this movement has gotten rolling a little bit. There were many, many years that, I think the state of Texas had basically become complacent to the definition that these plants and APO operators, and of course, under the guidance of the TCEQ, could virtually move into any place they wanted to with very little questions asked and, very little oversight from the agency as far as, what they were planning on doing. And of course, no communication with the existing neighbors, which I found difficult to absorb. The first one that came in here was the asphalt ink plant that was coming in by our brand new hospital and was virtually going to put it in a very, very bad place as it's just now growing. And we were able to delay that with the help of the city of Marble Falls. We were able to delay that project. And as it stands now, it's still for sale. So we don't have activity across there. But once again, as you mentioned, I am in the construction business and have been forever, it seems. I used to have hair, Terry, when I started construction business. But I'm also a developer. We have a developer just right down the road from where the asphalt ink plant was going to go in Round Mountain, Texas. But like the Clintons, I'm very pleased to hear all the activities that they have taken upon themselves to make their ranches a much, much better place. And that's what we're looking to get to, Terry, obviously, is for everybody to be good neighbors. We have to have aggregates. I use them every day, whether it be concrete. We had over a mile of roadway and curbing there at my existing development. And of course, there's concrete curve with a blacktop asphalt road going in. Excuse me, y'all. Pardon my voice a little bit. I'm dealing with a few little issues here, but we have tried to be very, very mindful of everything we've done with our project, and in accordance with leaving this world a better place than when we got here. We have put it in place. Water conservation in all of our residences. We have restricted the size of the yards in each of the houses there so that the irrigation would be minimized. We have asked, and in our restrictions, we mandate that folks use virtually drought-proof type products in all their landscaping. And once again, to minimize that landscaping, the water conservation, we are asking folks to, and this of course up to them, but we are advocating rain harvesting systems there so that we can access that water for landscaping needs and not use the water out of our aquifer. We're on the Trinity Aquifer. We're in a really good place, but I don't see any reason ever to waste it, just like this year has been such a dry year. I mean, it's only rained like once in 6 months, it seems like. So, we're trying to do our part also as developers and as builders. When we build our homes, we do them the way that the world has started to change from an energy standpoint, and try to do everything that we can from our end to make sure that our homes are energy efficient for our owners. But as you said, and we cannot get by ever without aggregate business. I mean, we use it every day, but everybody wants to be happy. And when you have an existing neighborhood, as you mentioned, Double Horn, I was appalled when that group from New York, purely and simply appalled that they purchased that property between two existing developments, not new developments like Georgetown that have moved around an existing quarry, but the existing developments that they just plugged in and said, we're going to be digging in your backyard. I mean, that has got to change. And I know that TACA is working with folks. We've had discussions. As I mentioned early on, they've been very forthcoming with me. They've come to visit. We've toured the Hanson plant here, which I encourage everyone to do. And I know that you have, Terry, but I encourage folks, if you have the opportunity, to tour a big plant like that, because it's very, very enlightening. I learned a number of things there that I never knew before. And of course, I've been studying this for 4 years, and there's a lot to learn. That's what I would counsel folks to begin with about TACA and the industry and about TCEQ, that there is a whole lot of information out there that can be very, very confusing, but it's worth your while to learn that information. And from a construction standpoint, anything that I could do on my part to reduce any negative activity on the environment as we're building roads, et cetera, we're certainly going to do. So, we're working towards that direction also from our end. We know we have to have them, but we all want to get along and be happy when we're using aggregate product.
Thank you, Grant. It's been my experience with this issue that it's not specific to APOs. It's whenever any business comes into a town or a community that just wants to make some money and leave, they inevitably leave it worse off than they found it. But what I have found going through and visiting with good companies, especially industry, in a large scale as this, when any industry builds itself as a part of the community, they make something like what the Clintons have built, or Texas crushed stone in Georgetown, that sticks around for generations and literally builds the community up around it.
Absolutely.
What's been your experience in terms of a businessman, a construction company that buys these products, purchases these products, and of course, you know a lot of contractors out there. Do y'all take those companies in consideration when deciding who to buy it from, even if it means going 20 miles down the road, knowing that the delivery charge is going to be higher? Expand on those types of things, please.
Actually, I do. We do. I can't speak for the other contractors. We had a lot of them move into our area because we're extremely busy here, Terry. But I certainly do take that in consideration. I know the better players around here, and it makes a big difference to us. I want to take this opportunity to commend you that we've got a brand new quarry coming into town to the north of the Hanson plant there, the Knife River guys, who are from out of state. But before they even began construction, they got with you and Judge Oakley, and I guess stipulated what their plans were, which were to become a better operator there, all voluntarily. And that's what, I would personally like to see, and my advocates would like to see, is that the companies become more on a volunteer basis, to where that they are doing the right things, where we don't have to make those kind of choices, where I don't have to think about if I'm buying concrete. And of course, it's gotten outrageous what it costs from when I started 4 years ago, but you have to take all that into consideration from a cost standpoint, but also from a record standpoint. which, and I'm not going to mention any names right now, but and we've had a ton of concrete companies move in here in the last 5 years. I mean, they're just like everywhere now, and everyone's pretty well gotten around the same pricing out there, but there are better operators than others for sure, which does weigh on us as we're making a decision on what concrete to buy for sure.
Yeah, I tell you, maybe there's things that local communities and local governments can do to, highlight those companies that are doing good things. I'll tell you, before this COVID-19 piece kicked in, I went to Houston just to drive around and look at some of these asphalt plants that have gone in. And it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, literally, there will be an open field between neighborhoods, and they will insert themselves, put up a high fence, but nonetheless, the truck traffic is just exceptional going through there. The community can't even keep up with the road maintenance, much less build new roads. It's just absolutely unreal. Another thing that I've noticed now, some of the dialogue that is changing within our county governments, where, before, if you'd ever suggested to a commissioner's court any sort of P&Z authority within the county, they'd say, oh, heck no. But now, because of the issues that they're having, and of course, they see as the state not doing anything to help with the bad actors, because the state's, frankly, hands are tied. There's enough frustration out there that dialogue is happening within our commissioner courts to potentially have that P&Z piece. One of the things that we should probably look at, and I hate to admit this, because to suggest that Texas regulation is inadequate compared to federal government regulation. We when we talk about the federal government, we certainly consider it overbearing, overreach, all those other sorts of things. But frankly, the one thing that I have found interesting is that when there's doing a request for proposals in the industry for these multi-billion-dollar contracts, and they do the source selection process, part of their criteria in selecting these companies is not just the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
Like we do here in the state of Texas. Matter of fact, they look at best value. And within best value is past performance criteria. In other words, how many violations has that supplier to that end item may have taken place? Has there been any issues associated with safety, inadequate expertise of employees, thus causing other issues? But it just goes on and on and on, and it's amazing the source selection process stipulated by the Federal Acquisition Regulation has really been able to get after rewarding good companies and their suppliers with those contracts. So, maybe in the future that is something that we'll look to here in the state as well. Any thoughts?
That's a great idea. And, and from the building standpoint, for an example, there's tons of builders out there, Terry, but it does not necessarily mean that you're getting the best product. And, when we come forth with a price on our product, we have subcontractors that have been working for us for 20 years, but we're very well aware of their experience. They may cost a little more, but we are of solid belief that they're worth it because we know it'll be done right. We know the warranty factor will be in place when they complete a job. So it's worth a little more money to us to use folks that we're familiar with. And I certainly could see the state of Texas taking that into consideration as they award these contracts. I think it's a great idea.
Well, it would certainly make it easier for companies or that use that end product to be able to select responsible suppliers out there to their communities. Of course, that's just an idea to just toss on the road, because frankly, if you're one of those suppliers and like Hanson or Texas, Stone and so forth like that, you'd be tripping all over yourself to continue to sustain what you've already built. And
Sure.
and with that, I will tell you that I'm very excited over what you have done for us last couple of years, Gary. You've worked hard. You're
Thank you,
going
sir.
to recognize some of the folks who'll be on tomorrow that has a lot of expertise, and we'll get into the science of some of the issues. And a lot of the things that you talked about today, or what we have talked about today, and your contribution really ties us into what we will be talking about tomorrow. So I
And
hope
that's where
everyone
that's where
out
I've got
there
to.
listening joins us again tomorrow for day 2, which we are calling APO Impacts on Texas Communities. We'll be hearing from community groups and local governments about how APOs impact their communities. We will also hear from state agencies about their roles they play in oversight for this industry. Thank you to all those that have joined us today, and a special thanks to Jill, the Clinton family, Josh with TACA, and of course Grant. I hope the folks listening have learned about more about what the aggregate industry does and the impact that it has on our state, as well as some success stories of where aggregate operations have been a good neighbor. Remember, and folks, if you guys, if you'll put the slide up again for me, how they can contact us. I just want you to remember out there, if you would like to share your story and input, please register for Thursday session by sending an email to the address that you should be seeing on your screen right now. Thank you all, and farewell till tomorrow.